A young nurse saved a plane from crashing when both pilots passed out midair. 24 hours later, she received a shocking invitation from the president. What she did while flying the plane left everyone in deep shock. It was on a quiet Saturday morning when Ava Morgan, a 24-year-old nursing student, boarded a flight from Texas bound for New York, unaware of the event that would change her life forever. It was Easter break, and with the hospital unusually quiet and her nursing shifts finally giving her a breather, she decided to spend a week with her parents. Her mom had been begging her to come home for months. Her dad? He just sent her a text. Skies are clear. Come fly home. The airport bustled with life. Families headed off for spring vacations. Children clutched chocolate bunnies, their laughter drifting through the terminal like music. Ava, dressed in her nursing school hoodie and a pair of well-worn jeans, walked quietly to gate 17, clutching her faded leather backpack. Inside were two things that defined her: a folded nursing textbook and a dog-eared copy of Miracles in the Sky, a book her late grandfather had gifted her before he passed. He was a retired commercial pilot who taught Ava how to recognize cloud types before she could ride a bicycle. The sky was in her blood, but nursing was her calling. She never wanted to be a pilot. She wanted to heal. As she boarded the plane, Flight 482, a middle-aged flight attendant smiled at her. "First time flying alone?" the woman asked gently. Ava smiled back. "No, but it still feels like the first time every time." The plane wasn't completely full, just enough people to make the rows feel lived in. Ava settled into her window seat, row 12A. An elderly man beside her was already dozing off, mouth slightly open, snoring softly. Across the aisle sat a teenage boy, completely absorbed in a handheld gaming console. Ava put in her earbuds, leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. The hum of the engines, the muffled chatter of passengers, and the occasional ding of the seatbelt sign comforted her. For a while it felt like just another flight. Until it didn't. About an hour into the flight, Ava felt a slight turbulence shake the plane. Nothing unusual, just minor bumps. But then came a long, steady dip and a sudden silence from the cockpit. Then a ding. The flight attendant who had smiled at Ava earlier emerged from the galley, pale-faced, walking briskly toward the cockpit. The murmurs started, first in the front, then quickly spreading. The teenage boy paused his game. The elderly man beside Ava woke up, blinking in confusion. A minute later, the same flight attendant re-emerged, this time her hands visibly trembling. "Is there a doctor or medical professional on board?" she called out, trying to remain calm. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She stood up. "I'm a nurse," she said. The attendant rushed over. "Please come with me. It's the pilots. They're unresponsive." The words hit Ava like ice. She followed the attendant down the narrow aisle, past the stunned stares of other passengers and into the cockpit. Both pilots, Captain Rodriguez and First Officer Klein, were slumped in their seats, unconscious. "They collapsed about 10 minutes ago," the flight attendant whispered. "We thought they were sleeping. But they're not waking up." Ava quickly knelt beside the captain and checked his pulse. It was faint but still there. The first officer, however, had a dangerously low heart rate. Ava looked up. "I think it's carbon monoxide exposure. Or maybe a sudden pressure issue. I need to get them oxygen now." Ava sprang into action. Years of medical training took over as she scanned the cockpit. She quickly found the emergency oxygen masks, pulled them over the pilots' faces and adjusted the flow settings. The cabin crew stood frozen behind her, their expressions switching between fear and disbelief. "Do you have a first aid kit?" Ava asked sharply. The head attendant, Rachel, nodded and dashed to retrieve it. Moments later, Ava was checking vitals, whispering medical terms under her breath, trying to stay calm even as adrenaline pounded in her chest. Captain Rodriguez's pulse began to stabilize. He stirred slightly but remained unconscious. First Officer Klein was still dangerously close to full cardiac arrest. Ava looked around the cockpit, eyes falling on the blinking buttons and controls, the radio frequency meter and the glowing autopilot panel. Rachel stepped closer. "Can you fly this?" she asked. Ava's hands froze. I'm not a pilot. But you said your grandfather was one. Ava blinked. How had the attendant remembered that? Maybe she'd overheard her muttering earlier while reading the book. She hesitated. He taught me a lot. But I've never flown anything bigger than a Cessna in a simulator. Rachel's voice cracked. You're the closest thing we have to a pilot right now. We're losing altitude fast. The pressure in Ava's chest shifted from panic to purpose. She sat in the pilot's seat, quickly recalling every bit of her grandfather's training. The feel of the yoke, the radio code phrases, the way he used to say, "You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be ready." Ava scanned the instruments, adjusted the autopilot slightly, then reached for the intercom. Her voice trembled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ava Morgan speaking. I'm a nurse on board. Our pilots are currently incapacitated. But I am trained in basic aviation procedures and I am doing everything I can to keep us safe. Please remain calm and stay in your seats." The cabin went completely silent. She set the intercom down and turned to the flight control radio. "Mayday, mayday. This is Flight 482. Both pilots are unconscious. A non-pilot passenger is attempting to control the aircraft. Requesting emergency assistance." Static. Then a male voice crackled through. "Flight 482, this is New York Air Traffic Control. We hear you. Please confirm. Are both flight crew members down?" Ava exhaled. "Confirmed. Both are currently unconscious. I'm a nursing student with limited simulator training. I'm attempting to stabilize the aircraft until further instruction." The air traffic controller remained calm, but his voice had urgency. "Copy that, Ava. We'll guide you step by step. You're doing incredibly well. Let's keep this plane level." Meanwhile, in the cabin, panic brewed beneath the silence. Some passengers clutched armrests. Others whispered prayers. A child cried softly. A man in the back was already trying to livestream what was happening, muttering something about going viral. Rachel quietly confiscated his phone. Back in the cockpit, Ava gripped the yoke, adjusting slightly to reduce the sudden shuddering that had begun again. The turbulence was picking up. "Flight 482, you're currently 32 miles off course. Gently correct your heading by 10 degrees east." She followed instructions. Her hands shook, but her eyes never left the horizon. A sudden beep. One of the pilot's vitals was dropping again. "I need help up here," she shouted to Rachel. Rachel returned with another passenger, a retired military medic named Charles Dempsey. He knelt beside the co-pilot and began working with Ava's instructions. Ava toggled the radio again. "Flight control, I'm receiving assistance on medical. Please advise on descent procedures if needed." Ava's mind raced faster than the altimeter's digits dropping beside her. Flight control was still in her ear, guiding her steadily. Every second felt like it lasted an hour. She could hear the shallow breathing of the co-pilot behind her as Charles, the retired medic, administered oxygen and checked vitals with military precision. "His pulse is stabilizing," Charles said, still focused. "You keep flying. I've got this." Ava tightened her grip on the yoke. Sweat traced a line down her neck. She looked ahead through the windshield, sky beginning to shift in color, light blue fading into dusk. Time was moving and so was the plane. Fast. "Flight 482, begin reducing airspeed by 5%. You're currently at 34,000 feet. We need you to begin prepping for descent soon." She acknowledged, adjusting the throttle as her grandfather had once shown her. Her memories flooded back. The smell of the old simulator room. The way he'd pat her shoulder and whisper, "Altitude is your friend. But stay ahead of the plane." She whispered it now to herself. Behind her, Rachel kept checking on the rest of the passengers. Some were calm. Others were clearly falling apart. The elderly man from Ava's row was having a hard time breathing. A woman near the front fainted and had to be laid across 3 seats. Ava wanted to run back help, but she couldn't leave this seat. She was the only thing keeping 148 people from becoming a headline. Suddenly a jolt. A red light began flashing. Autopilot disengaged. "Flight 482 confirm. Autopilot just dropped. Are you manually flying?" Ava swallowed. "Affirmative. Autopilot just disconnected. I'm flying by hand. Copy. Keep your wings level. You're doing great. You're approaching stable altitude. Begin slow descent to 28,000 feet. Her fingers gripped the control column like her life depended on it, because it did. The nose dipped slightly. The plane shuddered but stayed on course. Another jolt. Ava's heart jumped as the oxygen mask above her flicked slightly. Cabin pressure warning. She didn't panic, not externally. We need to drop altitude now. This could get worse, she told flight control. They agreed. Descend to 24,000 feet immediately. Maintain current heading. He began the descent. Slowly. Precisely. Ava, you're doing incredible, came the voice in her headset. Not many could do what you're doing right now. But Ava wasn't thinking about pride. She wasn't thinking about being a hero. She was thinking about her dad, who would be waiting at the airport gate with a coffee and a corny, "I told you you could do it," grin. She was thinking about her mom's homemade lasagna. About the photo of her grandfather in the living room with his aviation wings pinned on the frame. He was thinking about staying alive. Rachel returned to the cockpit. The passengers are holding on. Everyone knows what's going on now. No one's screaming. Some are praying. Some are crying. But they trust you. Ava blinked. Why? She asked softly. Rachel smiled. Because you didn't run. You sat here. You stayed. The weight of it hit her hard. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay steady. The descent continued. 20,000 feet. 18,000 feet. Flight control. Ava, you'll begin visual contact with runway lighting in approximately 6 minutes. We're preparing emergency services. You'll be cleared for a straight-line approach. The cockpit light dimmed slightly as the evening sun dipped below the horizon. Ava's eyes flicked across every meter, every dial. She didn't know what landing this plane would feel like. But she knew one thing. She had no intention of dying today. The air inside the cockpit grew thinner, quieter, like even the atmosphere knew how close they were to fate. Ava's eyes stayed locked on the runway indicator. Her fingers adjusted the trim as she began preparing for the final descent. The airport was now less than 10 minutes away. Below, the twinkling city lights began to stretch into view. Flight control crackled again in her headset. Ava, you're clear for emergency landing at JFK. Runway 27 left. You'll see the approach lights soon. She nodded even though they couldn't see her. Copy that. 27 left. Behind her, Charles gave a hopeful update. Captain Rodriguez is starting to come around. His vitals are stable. First Officer Klein is still unconscious but holding steady. Rachel squeezed Ava's shoulder gently. You got this, Ava. Just a little further. Ava nodded but said nothing. The pressure was unbearable. Her stomach twisted as she mentally replayed every landing simulation she'd ever done with her grandfather. Never a commercial jet. Never 148 lives. Never this kind of silence. Her headset buzzed again. Ava, reduce airspeed by another 10 knots. Begin flaps adjustment. You'll want to prepare gear in 60 seconds. She followed instructions mechanically, her brain split between medical instinct and inherited muscle memory. Her palms were slick with sweat, yet her movements were steady. Landing gear ready in 3, 2, 1. He pulled the lever. The gear deployed with a loud mechanical thunk beneath them. The cabin let out a unified gasp. Ava steadied the yoke. The runway lights appeared like a glowing ribbon across the dark horizon. She lined the plane up as best as she could. Altitude at 1,500. You're on final approach, flight control guided her. Ease down. You're nearly there. Rachel was whispering something now, maybe a prayer. Maybe just reassurance she hoped Ava could feel. At 900 feet, a gust of wind nudged the plane sideways. Ava instinctively corrected, dipping the opposite wing just enough to recover. Her heart thudded. At 500 feet, she could see emergency vehicles lined up beside the runway. Dozens of flashing lights. Medics. Fire trucks. Cameras. All waiting. At 200 feet, Ava held her breath. The ground rose up beneath them. She eased the yoke, gently pulled back. A thump. The tires hit the tarmac with a jolt that rattled every bone in her body. Another bounce. Then the wheels locked. The plane roared as it sped down the runway. Passengers screamed. Some cried. Some clapped. Some simply sat in stunned silence. Ava kept her hands tight on the controls. Deploying reverse thrusters, she whispered to herself. The jet gradually slowed. Slower. Slower. And then, they were stopped. Dead still. On solid ground. She collapsed back in the chair, lungs burning with relief. Rachel threw her arms around her, sobbing. Charles let out a long, grateful exhale and patted her shoulder. Flight control. Flight 482, welcome home. The intercom light blinked again. Ava clicked it, her voice soft but unwavering. This is Ava Morgan. We are safely on the ground. Emergency crews may now board. The plane erupted in cheers. People clapped. Some openly wept. A baby wailed. A man in the back stood and saluted the cockpit. The door burst open moments later as paramedics rushed in, taking over the care of the pilots. Charles briefed them quickly. Rachel led the medical team through the aisle. Ava just sat there, staring forward. Hands still on the controls. Moving. Tears finally beginning to fall. Ava sat in the cockpit long after the noise faded. Even after the paramedics left, even after Rachel whispered, "They're going to be okay," Ava remained frozen in the seat. Her fingers trembled on the control yoke, not out of fear anymore, but release. The door opened quietly. A man in a navy blue suit stepped in, Agent Keller, Secret Service. He stood tall, serious, with an earpiece coiled behind his ear. "Miss Morgan?" he asked. Ava blinked. "Yes. You need to come with me." She nodded slowly, rising from the seat for the first time in what felt like forever. Rachel offered her a soft hug as she stepped into the aisle. Every head turned. Passengers whispered, clapped again, some reaching out to touch her hand as she walked by. A boy in row 16 extended a folded paper. "You saved us," he said simply. Ava took it, tucked it in her hoodie pocket. Outside the plane, the tarmac was chaos. Sirens flashed. Reporters were screaming. Cameras flashed. Agents in black moved in synchronized directions. Ava shielded her eyes as she was guided into a waiting black SUV. Inside sat a woman in a sharp blazer with a kind face. "Ava, I'm Emily Foster, White House liaison." Ava's eyebrows rose. "What?" "The president has requested to see you." "The president of what?" Emily smiled. "Of the United States." Ava's mouth opened but nothing came out. She sat back against the seat, hands still slightly trembling. Emily continued. "You prevented a national disaster. Had that flight gone down, 148 souls would have been lost, and it would have made headlines worldwide. But you kept them alive. That's not just brave. That's history." The car drove in silence for a while. Ava's head spun. She wasn't ready for this. She hadn't even eaten dinner. Her hoodie still smelled like jet fuel. Her hands still ached. "I'm not a hero," she whispered. Emily looked at her kindly. "That's what all the real heroes say." Later that night, in a private room at a secure location near the airport, Ava was given water, a clean change of clothes, and 10 minutes to breathe. She called her mom. The phone rang 3 times. Then her mother's voice, sharp, anxious, answered. "Ava? Ava, are you okay? We saw the news. We saw the plane. Are you?" "I'm okay, Mom. I'm really okay." Her mom sobbed softly on the other end. Then her dad's voice broke through. "You landed it, didn't you? You really did it." Ava nodded, though they couldn't see. "Yeah, Dad. I did." Then came the knock. Emily again. "It's time." Ava was led into a large, quiet room. At the far end, flanked by aides and cameras, stood the president. He turned as she entered and stepped forward. "Miss Morgan," he said warmly, extending a hand. "On behalf of the United States, I want to thank you for what you did today." Ava swallowed hard, took his hand. "I was just doing what I could." The president smiled. "That's exactly what makes it extraordinary." Behind him, a military officer handed the president a small blue box. He opened it and turned back to Ava. "It is my great honor to present you with the Presidential Medal of Civilian Valor." He pinned the medal on her chest as flashes from official cameras lit up the room. But Ava barely noticed. She was thinking about her grandfather. About his old flight manual. About the dog-eared copy of Miracles in the Sky, still in her backpack. About the moment she sat in the pilot's seat, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. The photo of Ava Morgan receiving the Presidential Medal of Civilian Valor went viral overnight. News channels broadcasted her story across every major network. Headlines read, "Nurse lands passenger jet after pilot's collapse." 24-year-old hero saves 148 lives at 30,000 feet. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #SkyNurse, #AvaTheAngel, and #ModernMiracle trended globally. People started drawing fan art, posting tributes, and sharing flight photos. The passenger from row 16 uploaded a video of Ava walking down the aisle, which alone got 3.8 million views in 24 hours. But Ava wasn't reading the comments. She was sitting in a hospital room beside First Officer Klein, who had just woken up. His voice was raspy, eyes confused. "What happened?" he asked. Ava smiled softly. "You had a medical emergency mid-flight. You passed out." "I landed the plane." He blinked. "You landed a 737? She nodded. "Pause. Holy. You're not even a pilot." "Nope. Nursing student." He laughed. Then winced. "Well, remind me to never underestimate nurses again." Later that day, Captain Rodriguez regained full consciousness. When he learned what Ava had done, he insisted on personally signing her flight cap and hugging her tight with tears in his eyes. "You saved me," he whispered. "You saved all of us." Back at home in Texas, Ava's small town threw a parade. Her high school gym teacher cried. The principal made a speech about courage and calm under pressure. Her old childhood friends made banners that said, "Our girl from row 12A." Ava sat in the back of the parade car, waving slowly, still in disbelief. Local news anchors begged her for interviews. Colleges called offering scholarships. The head of a national flight academy even offered her a spot in their training program. But Ava turned them all down. She didn't want to be a celebrity. She didn't want cameras in her face or speeches on stages. She just wanted to go back to the hospital. Back to the scrubs. Back to the patients who needed her. "I didn't land that plane to be famous," she said in one interview. "I did it because someone had to. And because 148 people were counting on me to do what I knew how to do, stay calm and help." 1 week later, Ava walked into the hospital's trauma wing. The nurses clapped when she entered. The security guard at the front saluted her. The cafeteria named a sandwich after her. But she just smiled, tied up her ponytail, and went straight to the ER. A 6-year-old girl was waiting in room 3 with a broken wrist. She was crying. Ava walked in, knelt beside her, and said softly, "Hi. I'm Nurse Ava. I'm gonna take care of you now." The girl sniffled. "Are you the airplane lady?" Ava chuckled. "Maybe. My mommy said you're brave." Ava smiled and tapped the girl's cast. Being brave just means doing what's right even when you're scared. That night, after a full shift, Ava sat in her room with her grandfather's flight book open beside her. She looked out the window at the stars. A small box sat on her nightstand, the one with the medal. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. What mattered most wasn't what she got for landing the plane, but who she had become because of it.